Hi, everybody. My name is Sheri Greenawald. I'm the artistic director for the Metropolitan Opera program. And we're here this afternoon. We're very, very lucky to have for a conversation Miss Francesca Zambello, who is the artistic director for the Washington National Opera in Washington, D.C. And she is the general director for Glimmerglass Festival, which is ongoing as we speak in a way right now. And she's also been artistic advisor for the San Francisco Opera, of course. And so she's sort of in the family, we think. We like to think of her in the family. We, of course, go back quite a few years. We've known each other, how many? We're always embarrassed to say anymore.
It's 30 something.
Yes, it is 30 something. And some of my favorite productions I've ever done, we were just speaking about, we did Street Scene together in Houston, and that was just a phenomenal, wonderful production. But we also did a world premiere there. We did Florencia Amazonas of Daniel Catan, and who has left us. He's passed away already. Then we did an enormous production of Vojno Mir, War and Peace at the Seattle Opera, and that was quite something together, right?
Yeah, that was in 1990. So that is really, I think, the beginning of our artistic collaboration.
And that was like a behemoth to take on. That thing was amazing, and it was a co-production with the Bolshoi.
Yes, it was an amazing experience. I think for everybody. I think that it was the beginning of Perestroika and the fall of the Soviet Union, so becoming Russia. And even remember when we were rehearsing, the city of Leningrad went back to its original name of St. Petersburg, and we had so many cast members who were from there. And I will never forget some of them literally falling to their knees and weeping.
Oh my gosh. Well, I remember very distinctly also you're wanting an unnamed baritone to get up on a stool and sing. And he very determinedly looked at you and said, "I do not sing on stools."
Okay.
Do you remember that?
I don't, but I certainly have probably had 10,000 moments like that with various cast members of I don't want to, I don't do. And that's the fun of being a director, is helping people come over to your side a bit.
Amen. Well, I knew your mother, Jean, who went by Sincere when she was an actress. And she's in one of my favorite Frasier episodes where she's the other woman and she beats up on the man with her purse. And that's like, I go, yay, Jean, you go. And I love that. But I never met your father. But he was also an actor at first, right?
Yeah.
And he became the head of flight entertainment for TWA.
That's right.
Which is amazing to me. I love that. I love TWA. I'm sad they're no longer in existence. So you lived in Europe. How did that happen? You sort of grew up in Europe in a way.
Right. Well, my father was Italian, and we lived in New York City, and as you said, he worked for TWA. He was eventually he became the head of what became known as in-flight entertainment. That was back in the days when airlines had nothing. And so he came up with the idea of putting music in seats and putting headphones on to listen to it. And my mother was an actress, which definitely helped lead me into the theater. And we moved to Paris when I was like 11 years old. My father wanted to live in Europe. And so I was very fortunate that we spent all of those adolescent and teen years living abroad in France and in Austria. So it was a great experience.
Well, so by the time you were in high school, how many languages were you covering at that time?
Well, we learned Italian growing up, and by then I spoke French and German. And then I went to Russia when I was in college for a year. I took a study year abroad and learned Russian. And that was back when, no, the reason I went there was nobody wanted to go. And so it was unbelievably cheap. And I thought it would be a great experience to go to the then Soviet Union. And it was, because so much theater and culture and art comes from there. So, I
Absolutely.
mean, it's like, I know we can't travel now unless we're getting in our cars. I don't know where all you are out there, all you Marolinis. But I certainly think that traveling virtually right now is a great way to be learning and experiencing things.
Absolutely. I know. Going to Europe, for me, I moved to New York when I was 20, and I guess I got to go to Europe when I was 21 by myself. I can't believe I did it. You think about the things you did when you were young and you go, I'd be scared to death to do that now. But I went with a Eurail pass and just went to Europe, right? That's what you did.
Well, I think, I think people still do that. And I really hope everybody out there who's listening will be able to do that very soon, because I think for people who want to work in the arts, traveling and experiencing it firsthand is key.
Oh,
And,
yes.
we still can travel cheaply if you can figure it out. And I think it's just those experiences are invaluable.
I totally agree. How did this debut in Houston come? Your real big directorial debut was in Houston with Fidelio. How did that come about?
Well, I actually think it's great that you're in San Francisco, because I started at the San Francisco Opera. That was one of my first jobs. I was an assistant director on the staff there. And at the time, David Gockley, the former general director of San Francisco, ran the Houston Grand Opera, and someone canceled to direct the production.
Ooh.
And I had met him because I had been an assistant director in Houston and done something a year before. And he called me and said, if you can come up with a really cheap concept for a new production, and I'll give you this much money for a budget, and I like it, then I'll hire you. And that is literally what happened. And that's why I always tell everybody in this business, you have to accept the fact that you are often not the first choice, and you have to be ready. So it doesn't matter if you're, want to be a director or a conductor or a singer, just being in the ready position is really often how the breaks happen and how those things come about. And so David, I came up with an idea with the designer and presented it to him in a week, I remember. And it was, at the time, this was, the late 80s, and America was in a conflict with Central America, with Nicaragua. Not like we're not in a million conflicts right now. And it was sort of set in that world, in a regime, in a kind of a sort of dictatorship. And it was an incredibly simple set, and it was a very contemporary setting with a lot of chain link fences and a Jeep. And we presented it to him and he loved it, and we did it, and it was a big success. Now, that's not like you have a big success and off you go with your career, but it definitely was a first sort of step, which was great. And I'm very grateful to him.
You maintained that relationship with David forever.
Right. Well, I worked very often in Houston, and then when he took over San Francisco, and but I've had a relationship with San Francisco Opera since 1982, actually, and I've worked there so much, and I've been so proud of doing things like the Ring Cycle there and so many other productions. And it's a great, great company. And my heart goes out to all those kids, all of you who aren't experiencing the magic of the San Francisco Opera up close, because it's a phenomenal, phenomenal company. And I know that the staff does a great job with the Merolini. And I remember my first year in San Francisco, and I remember one of the Merolini was Dolores Zajic.
Oh, yes.
So, I've seen a lot of great singers go through there and go through that program and the Adler program.
I know. We've been very lucky. Well, that was one thing I was going to say. One of the things I'm always so impressed by is that you have worked for Disney, the Disney Corporation, and that's no small feat. I understand that on a very
Yeah.
sort of business level, what that means. I mean, you've done live shows for them in Disneyland, right?
Yes.
You've done that, but you also did The Little Mermaid on Broadway.
Yes.
No
Well,
small feat either, right?
no, I mean, I think, as a director, you want to take on all different kinds of genres. And I think as a director, like I think of it as, we're storytellers. We're all storytellers, everybody, in every aspect of this profession. But as a storyteller, I think it's, directing an opera, it's not exactly like directing a musical, but there are many similarities. And it does start with character and with story and music and words.
Have you ever
So yes, I've worked for everybody, I feel like.
Have you ever directed Rusalka?
That's an opera I never have directed. I directed the Macropolis Case and Yanufa and Katya, but I never directed Rusalka, which I love, which is, the Little
I wonder
Mermaid,
how your experience with the one would influence the other,
No.
How to deal with underwater is something curious enough, I think.
Yeah. Well, yes. Well, but I mean, in opera, it's like standard fare that we're dealing with otherworldliness all the time, or we're dealing with very real situations and very up close and in your face, and other situations that are just totally fantastical. I mean, that's like one of the great things about our art form is that, it starts out by the fact that people are singing, which is not real. And, and so we're already at a certain heightened level.
Absolutely, we are. That's for sure. I wanted to know because it's a question that has come up from other classes and things. How do you balance? I mean, you work very hard. Your spouse also works very hard. How do you balance your private life and this work life? How do you find balance, or is there a balance?
Well, I think it's tricky, and I gather the audience is a lot of young artists, so it's very different at that point of your career. I think, well, now, of course, I haven't gone farther than 5 miles from Cooperstown, New York in 4 months. We've been in our house with our son, and we haven't gone anywhere. And which is a real amazing experience, because we have never been together 4 months straight, day in and day out, because we both travel so much for work. I think as people go on and make their careers, it's a tricky part of the business, is maintaining your personal life with your professional life. And I think, at a certain point, people make a commitment about a personal life and decide what it is. And it may not be a relationship. It may be just that you need a home. And, in a funny way, that's one of the great things about performers now, is that performers live anywhere. It used to be, it was very New York centric, like everybody lived in New York, or everybody lived in London or Berlin or Paris. Now people live everywhere, as long as they live near an airport. And so I think, personal life can either be a relationship and somebody who may travel with you, or it may be about, really about making a home and making a commitment to a certain place or other parts of your family or whatever. I do think for an artist, it's important to have a personal life. And that may not mean a relationship. It means a window into yourself. And so you may be having that personal life by a relationship with nature. I'm looking out at the forest right now. Or with sports or with health, or it's important to have something else. And that makes you, I think, a better artist. I think that's really important.
A lot of divas travel with their dog. And I remember your dog, Sugar.
Yes, I had a beagle. Now I have a Labrador. He does not go anywhere. He lives here. Labs are not like people traveling with their little poodles or small dogs or whatever. I think listen, I'm all for pets. I think pets are great. They're great for your sanity. And my dog, I'm looking over here at him, his name is Rome, and he has been looking at me like when I say we're going to go for a walk, he's like, again? Haven't we had enough already today? It's like, how many times are we going to go outside today?
Lucky dog. I'm very jealous.
Yeah, no, he has a good life. He has a very good life. But I think, look, whatever it takes, you have to have something else besides your work. You just have to. Makes you a better artist, better person.
I wanted to also ask you, did you have musical training and acting training? What did you study? How did you come to be able to even like read a musical score?
Well, I was lucky about music because my grandmother was a concert pianist on my mother's side, and we had a piano at home, and she taught me when I was young. And I kept up with that basically during elementary school, and then I picked up several instruments, as you do in school. I learned the flute, the clarinet. Then I was tall, so I was assigned to the bass clarinet. And I sort of kept those up through high school. So I never would have said to myself, I wouldn't write myself down as a musician, but I still play the piano. And in terms of acting, I think, being around the theater from an early age and then working, I worked my way up as like a production assistant, starting actually in summers in high school. I think I always knew I wanted to be a director. I wasn't interested in performing. I was always interested in the big picture, the big story, how to tell the big story. And so I think that I learned a lot of craft by actually internship programs. I was an intern in a couple of different theater companies in the summers. I learned a lot doing that. And then once I went through college, I majored in philosophy and English literature, completely impractical things, but great things for your spirit and your soul. And I think it's important to be able to, to honestly, to read and think and write. And then I started working in the theater right after university, working as a production assistant in New York City at a bunch of different theater companies. But I always liked opera. And back in those days, there was New York City Opera. And that was a really fun place to go see performances, sometimes in English, but with really young, great young, vibrant performers.
Yeah,
of which you were one, Sheri. You're still a great, vibrant performer. You just maybe were a little younger then, but really, I was very taken with opera on that level because it was bigger than the naturalism of theater, and so it was a way to experience things through music. And in those days, I used to just spend all my free time at the Performing Arts Library at Lincoln Center, where you could bury your head in a score and a recording. And, and it was, so in a sense, that was my training. And then I went to Europe. I went back to Europe because my family was there, and I got a job as an intern in Germany at an opera house. So it's sort of, one thing leads to another.
Well, I think we have someone who wants to come on and ask a question, so we'll let them emerge, I hope. I think all the language training is always so critical for opera too. The fact that you are multilingual just makes it easier.
I think that learning a language is vital. Hi, Audrey, how are you?
Hey, Francesca, I'm good.
Good to see you. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Audrey is our director. She's our director.
I know her. Yes.
Okay. I'm silly.
Okay. I knew she wasn't a soprano.
Oh, yes. I've made a very drastic life change since this year. No. So my question is, I know in the industry, we've all been talking about the issue of racism in opera. And so in terms of directors in our craft, I've only met one Black director, and that was under your artistic leadership at Glimmerglass last summer, Tazewell Thompson directing Blue. And I would love to hear your thoughts on how we can make the opera world a better space that encourages Black leadership and specifically directors to come to us and just encourage.
And I'll just jump in to say that in all my time at Merola, I mean, unless my memory is just really bad, which it can be, I don't think I ever interviewed one African-American or Black director for the position in Merola.
Well, I think, Audrey, it's incumbent on us to recruit young people who are interested, BIPOC people who are interested in production and administration, not just performers. And, you know, that's sort of how that track can happen, is going to many of the universities that have a historic connection with Black students who might be interested in theater. I mean, that's the main thing, is really how to mentor young people. And sometimes you have to go seek them out, and making sure that they know that we're providing a safe space and a place where that can develop. At Glimmerglass, where I am right now, we have created various affinity groups and allyship groups to work with the kids who we have this summer. And I have worked with a number of, let's say, noted Black performers about helping to recruit and find young BIPOC kids who are interested, you know, directing, set design, production, administration. So a lot of it just comes from recruiting and making people know that those jobs are available, and seeking them out and helping train people. Because I think everything, and this is a much bigger conversation than just this Merola discussion, and it could take hours, but I do think everything goes back to education. Everything, whatever aspect of anything you're in, it's in education and training. And you know, it's the whole thing of now, you know, clearly educating people and dismantling systems that have not been fair and welcoming to people. I don't think that we should dismantle opera or classical music. I think that we should examine it under a different eye, but I don't want to throw away Beethoven, but I might want to not produce or have certain operas performed in the theaters that I'm working in. I hope that helps. So it's a very big discussion, a very important discussion, but one that maybe is longer than just this format.
Audrey, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I guess, do you have any thoughts about how, as a young director, I can help with that? Obviously,
well, first of all, you're in a great place right now in Merola. I think, like, for everybody, I think for singers, for everybody on this call right now, I think that the best way forward actually comes from within yourselves. Not just, I don't just mean like on the internet, but I mean getting out and connecting with people and creating performances, you know, for now, until we can go back in theaters, back to street art and performing in people's homes, and going out and, you know, finding audiences who may not have thought that opera is a welcoming art form. And that just does not mean people of color. That may be a class issue, you know, many different things. I mean, I don't know where you are right now. If you were in San Francisco, you could, you know, spend more time in, you know, other parts of the city than where the Opera House is located. But I do think that part of that is about going out and creating small groups. I think that a lot of what's going to happen now after the pandemic, and as we continue to work on Black Lives Matter and Black Culture Matters, is going to be about community and creating new communities and making our art, you know, connect and speak in communities. I think that's going to be a big thing. And then, of course, the other big thing for everybody on this call is vote, 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 register and vote, and register people who register people.
Oh,
yes.
You know, I'm in Ohio right now, so you know,
that's a good state to be in. Go out.
I think so too. There's no bubble, you know,
right?
The way there has been in previous cities I've lived in. Well, thank you so much, Francesca.
Okay, sure thing. Good to see you.
You
I
too.
think we have, Catherine Good is coming back. We met her earlier. She's good.
Hi,
There
Catherine.
she is. There she
Hi.
is.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. So I'm Catherine Good. I'm a soprano. I went to the University of Houston for undergrad and then Michigan State University for grad school. And I will be singing Lady with a Hand Mirror in Postcard from Morocco next summer.
She worked with Melanie Helton.
I did.
Great teacher.
Yes, she is. So my question is, European opera houses, at least in the US, tend to have a reputation for having more adventurous productions than what most US companies do. And I'm curious to know why you think that is, what American companies can learn from those productions, and if you see US productions moving in a more adventurous direction, maybe post-COVID.
Another question that could take the whole time. I think, well, first of all, for better or for worse, much of the opera repertory is Eurocentric. That's why I love American opera. You know, the operas that we've written and created, particularly since World War II, where, you know, the art form has developed much more in our country. So we're telling stories about us and about our culture, our people, our, you know, those are things that I think are important. So I think as those develop more and more, we see that those often tend to be more forward-thinking productions. And then there's economics. Economics are brutal. You know, European companies have much more government support. Europe supports the arts more and supports artists more. So a theater, you know, may not be so reliant upon donors or individual contributors. And many individual contributors want you to do something new or different as well. I'm not suggesting that, but there is definitely a different economic picture, and it's important to understand that often when you're producing something in the United States and creating, let's say, a season. So you want to have a real balance, whereas a European house, you know, there may not be as dependent on ticket sales, right, you know, or on donors. And so that, I think, has often been part of the reason underlying things. Of course, European directors have, you know, come from a different tradition. You know, Regie Theater, which means, you know, really direction theater, you know, had its roots in, you know, great German directors like, you know, Felsenstein, who ran the Komische Opera. You know, there's been, you know, many different, that's particularly Northern Europe, whereas, you know, you look at the South, so you look at Italian directors, you know, Visconti and Fellini, you know, that's a different school of directing. You look at the English directors, you know, so I think that each country has its own persona. And I think that in the United States, you know, we've had, you know, theater has gone so much more advanced in some ways than opera. And I think that opera has, you know, in many ways caught up and become, again, you know, an art form, particularly in smaller companies where there's much more room for experimentation. I mean, you have to, again, the economics, you know, a production costs a huge amount of money in a great big company like San Francisco or the Met. So, you know,
Francesca,
all things are
could I
part of
ask a question? I've always found it curious that people who will have modern art in their home, but when they go to the theater, they want to see it reproduced, you know, in the old-fashioned style. I always find that very curious.
I find that very strange too. And I think, you know, I spend a lot of time, a lot of my breath in my days explaining various things to various people, but I think audiences are, you know, they're changing so much right now. I mean, not just in the era of COVID, but I think that, you know, everyone working in opera, running companies, is trying to find ways to make new audiences, opera connect audiences, whether it's about using technology or the kinds of productions we do or the kind of music we do, or the people who we see on stage that should represent what our population is, what our country looks like. So these are all important things that go into enticing an audience and hopefully keeping an audience, developing the dialogue that you want with an audience. You know, you want, again, it goes back to community education.
Amen. Catherine,
Andy,
did that
next.
answer your question?
Yes, it did.
Thank you. Have we got another question to come up? I'm hoping. Otherwise, I have one. I've always got one for you, Jessica.
Andy, hi.
Yay. Hi.
Hi, Andy.
Uh,
There we go.
Yeah.
Yes, good. Hi there. I'm Andy Dwan. I'll be singing "Man with a Cornet Case" in Postcards next summer. I'm not sure how to phrase this question per se, but so forgive my rambling.
Just
how do you
go it.
How do you reconcile what acting that feels really authentic that ends up adding tension or and just the sort of different energy levels that one needs in film acting or Med HD acting versus acting towards the back row of a giant house, or just sort of advice about how to modify your acting in keeping your acting authentic while still having something that travels all the way to the back.
You're talking about one of the, things that directors spend a lot of time working with performers on is creating that balance. I think that there's this, everyone has their own way of working. And of course, as a performer, you have to realize a lot of what you think going to the back of the house, let's say in a big theater, a lot of that support is coming from the production around you. The visual, the scenery, the costumes, we're not talking about a concert now. So a lot of that lifting doesn't actually have to fall on your shoulders. What does have to fall on your shoulders is hopefully some kind of, truthful, honest acting with people on stage with you that's not overly self-conscious or too mannered, but it's really about, I think the best performers are, we always describe somebody when they're so natural or, they feel so in the moment, and those are tricky things to achieve because sometimes the simplest things on stage and the simplest acting and the clearest and the most focused acting, it sounds easy to explain, but it's so difficult. And so I think that, ultimately you want to be performing on a scale that I think equals the music, the character, and the relationships with the other characters on stage. And you shouldn't be worrying about, oh, this is too big, this is HD, or, oh, I need to be bigger. You shouldn't be thinking like that. You should be thinking about storytelling. And am I the character? Am I in that place? I think all those things like making it bigger and making it smaller, it's just, again, a lot of that will be helped by the visual world that the director and the designers have put you in. So in some ways you have to trust that and focus on creating your storytelling. That sounds like a very sort of easy, pat answer, but that is the truth.
No, that's good advice though. Just to trust yourself and do what the production needs. Yeah.
And that's what, now you've got this time to, I'm sure you're learning roles right now, to learn the roles and to spend the time, investigating the character, doing the research on the character, historical, composer research, text research, all those things that now you really have the time to learn something. You're a baritone, you probably want to sing the Count. I don't know. There's so much to learn about that right now that can connect to later to your performance. So I can only advocate that you invest that time right now. And that will help you later.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
thank you so much.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you.
I think we have a Ben coming. We have a Ben Brady coming, I believe. Yeah, I've got so many questions I still want to ask too. Okay, Ben Brady.
Hi,
Hi,
Francesca.
Ben.
Hi, very nice to see you. My name is Ben Brady.
Nice to see you.
I'm doing Antonio with Marilla next year, as well as part of the Schwabacher concert. You talked a lot about being a sort of a big picture director, and I've had the pleasure of being in some of your productions, very big picture productions. I was in Carmen last season in the chorus, and I also was in the chorus of the Goethe Dämmerung in the Ring cycle the previous year. So I guess my question for you is, how does it feel to be at the helm of such large productions does it feel more difficult to bring your vision to life as a director with so many moving pieces, or is it exciting to have such a wealth of resources to work with to tell the story you want to tell?
Well, I mean, I think it's important, like you articulated very well, you know, you always goes back to the story. And of course, you know, those are two big opera. I mean, Good at Dämmerung is huge, of course. I think there was a chorus of 96 people or something in that. I think that when you direct a big opera, you cannot get overwhelmed by the production. Again, you have to focus on the people and the story and the characters and be true to them and try and get the best performances out of, you know, Irene Turin and, you know, the cast that you have in front of you. Because all the work about the production and the scale of it, that's the work, honestly, that you do way before the rehearsal process. You do that work several years before when you're creating the designs with the designers, when you're working, you know, collaboratively with them to make a visual setting that you later will be putting, you know, the rehearsal people in. And of course, what you think sometimes is going to work great doesn't always. And so you know, you need to be able to change on a dime. I mean, I also direct a lot of very small things. And I started my career in a very teeny theater called the Skylight in Milwaukee. So I feel like I've done the range of things. I mean, and Glimmerglass is a 900 seat theater. So, you know, you have to create a visual space that holds the story. And that is very difficult because you're making decisions way before you have actors in it or performers or opera singers in it. And that's honestly the scariest part of the job, because you can change a person, you know, a person you're like, I don't like how you're doing that. Try this instead. Or what do you think? You got a better idea? You know, let's talk about it, you know. But a physical space is very difficult because you're creating a huge tableau, you know, particularly San Francisco, you know, the proscenium's 54 feet wide and 60 feet deep or whatever. So you want to create something, but you don't want to overwhelm the performers. You want the performers to pop. And that's what's so important. You know, Carmen, you know, Janae popping out even in the, you know, the tavern scene in the second act. You know, it's like you always want to, as a director, you always want to be able to make sure that you can focus on the principles. You know, I mean, the chorus is an integral protagonist often, and certainly in Good at Dämmerung in that big Gebettung scene. And then, of course, the chorus through Carmen is like nonstop. They're always on stage. So you want to make sure that they're individual characters in that kind of piece, I think. I don't know if I answered fully your question,
no, that's
but
exactly, no, absolutely.
You know, I'm glad you look so familiar. And when you said, I'm glad you said that, because I was like, I've seen that guy before. Okay, now I know where.
He's tall too.
Okay, all right. Yes, I remember. Did you have a beard before?
Well, for Carmen, we all had to shave, so not for Carmen or for Good at Dämmerung. I think we were clean shaven.
Okay, well, that explains it all. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good to see you, Ben.
I think we have someone you may know rather well coming now. I think Samson McCready is on his way.
Oh.
Yes. There he comes.
Samson, hi. Well, so for the other participants in this gathering, Samson McCready was a member of the K-Fritz Young Artist Program at the Washington National Opera, and is a wonderful singer, a wonderful baritone, and a wonderful actor. So hi, Samson.
Well, thank you so much, Jessica. It means a lot.
It's great to see you.
Good to see you again.
Oh my God, you cut all your hair.
I know. Well, all the barbers are closed, so I had to learn myself.
Okay, all right. Well, so what's up? What are we going to talk about?
Well, obviously we've worked together before, and one of the things I've never gotten the chance to ask you is who your creative idols are.
That's great. That's great.
Nice question.
Great. Well, actually, I you know, when before we were talking about directors, I mean, those are a lot of directors who I really looked up to, and read their works, studied them. I mean, the great director who I worked for as an assistant was a director named Jean-Pierre Panel. He was French, but he spoke everything. And I worked for him in France, Austria, and Italy. And I feel very indebted to him. And actually, I'm very indebted to the San Francisco Opera because I was working there as an assistant. And at that time, the then head of the artistic department was a woman named Sarah Billinghurst, who, of course, went on to the Met for 25 years. And she recommended, it's that thing I'm telling you, you got to be ready at the right time. So he lost an assistant for a production in Italy, and she called him and said, I think you need to meet Francesca. So I got on a plane to New York City, went to have an interview with him. I remember he was directing The Marriage of Figaro at the Met. And I had an interview and it went really well. And he said, you got the job. I'll see you at La Fenice in a month. And that was really, for me, it was the beginning of a huge collaboration with a great director who I learned a great deal from. But then, my idols have been, many of the directors of the past, like I mentioned, and a lot of film directors. Film directors, it's a completely different art form, but watching how people, film chooses where you look,
right.
The art of cutting and editing. And on stage, we, the director, often are the person who, through lighting and scenery and production values, create how you look. And so I feel that I've learned a lot from great directors of film, and have spent a lot of time watching a lot of, what you would say foreign films. And again, everybody, guys, you're all at home, go back and watch all the great French films, go back and watch the great Italian films, the great Russian films.
Swedish.
It's also, and Swedish. I mean, it's just, and film, oh my God, it's like, so it's free half the time. So I think for
Francesca,
me,
which film directors did you particularly love?
Well, I think I loved, Visconti, Fellini.
How about Hitchcock for lighting?
Hitchcock is lighting, of course. And then, stage, the great, Peter Stein. These are, it's just, you can go back and, films like Les Enfants de Paradis, these are the kind of things that I just was so taken, Cocteau's films, again, I feel like now, as difficult as life is, now is the time to invest time in movies and art and books and yourselves. Well, it looks like you've got 1 million books behind you, Samson. So I'm really happy to see. It's much better than the last time I talked to you on screen. You were in a room with a window up in the top.
All right. Well, it's the same room. It's just very small.
Okay. All right. Well, it's a whole new look. I love the bookshelves. So
Well, I
thank
appreciate
you.
that.
And
He
good luck.
usually has about 3 bikes behind him, though. That's what we've seen. So well, thank you, Samson. I think Nicola, are you coming? I think we have Nicola Prince coming. And Nicola is very unique in that she does aerial performances.
Wow.
Hi.
Hi. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good, thanks. Aerial performances. Wow, put that at the top of your resume.
It's somewhere on my resume.
Well, that's the kind of thing. Everybody, listen up. This is for your auditions. Very important. If you have a special, unique skill, make sure it's in a good place on your resume, because it's the kind of thing that, as a director, your eye gravitates to things like that.
Oh yeah.
Like, if we're doing The Bartered Bride, we're calling Nicola or Nicola Prince for sure.
Well, hi, my name is Nicola. I'm a mezzo-soprano, and I'll be singing The Foreign Singer in Postcard from Morocco next summer. And my question for you is, I know this answer varies from director to director, but how do you feel, what's your preference when you come into a rehearsal? Would you prefer singers to be more self-directed, or do you prefer for them to be like blank slates and just kind of absorb information, or do you like to work with singers and actors?
I think I'm just interested in who the person is behind the role, and to help meld the role with what their personality is often is most interesting, because so that doesn't mean necessarily be a blank slate or be, like have it all worked out for yourself, because you can't have it worked out, because it's the combustion of the director, the conductor, your colleagues, and all of that. So I think, again, like I was saying, I do think now is the time for you all to be investing in, if you're learning a role, to learn every aspect about it, spend time learning everything that you can, in terms of research that you might bring to a rehearsal later, but you might have it inside of you and not like spill your beans right on day one. It might be your sort of backup plan. I don't prefer one kind of singer or another. I just prefer that people are collegial and open to discussion. Nothing is worse than, as Sheri said, I don't stand on a stool. Nothing shuts everybody else's creativity down faster than I don't or no. And so I think, it's really important to come into a rehearsal open. I do think coming in prepared, like if you do not know your music and what it means, and I think it's better to have some thought process behind it to bring to the table, so that to engage in discussion about the music and about the character. And I think it's important to think about a character before you get started with it, because you're going to be living in that person for whatever period of time. It might be a character, Mimi, or, I don't know, you said you're a mezzo, you might be singing Charlotte for the next 25 years of your life. Mm-hmm. So you want to really know her and have something to say about her. Why do we want to see La Traviata again? We want to see La Traviata again because we hear the way that somebody interprets it differently. We see the way that they physicalize something in a different way. And that's the kind of, let's say, work investment that I recommend that, young artists can do beforehand. Because to me, who you are and what you are is the most interesting thing that you can meld with, with music mm-hmm. and a character. Make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, Cheska, in theater, first day, they sit at a table together and just read the script. Right. I have always appreciated it when directors, when that first day, when directors we sit around and discuss it, sort of the concept and what direction are we going? I like that.
I mean, that's usually how I start, is with a discussion. Mm-hmm. I mean, nothing on, so often opera rehearsals begin the first day with a sing through. But without really talking first. And nothing's worse, because then all the singers feel like they're auditioning again.
Yes.
Or like, trying to prove something. And, and I think that that's just not the best way to start a rehearsal. I think you want to create an atmosphere in rehearsal where people feel open and able to contribute and are want to be part of the whole picture and part of the team.
Well, don't you think we have, unfortunately, a little bit of a reputation for a sort of, I'll be very rude and say wham bam thank you ma'am kind of productions, well, and I think that has a lot to do with the economics of opera, right?
Well, I think that those kind of productions, I feel like a lot of that is sort of changed over time. We've created several generations of really interesting American complete performers who are, in the tradition of Sheri Greenawald, a great actress and a great singer. And that's been, I think, very much what America brought to the international opera scene in the last 40 or 50 years. And I think a lot of that comes from our own tradition of, singing in churches, singing in musicals in high school, being, using music, music is a big part of American society, and using it, kids are in bands and, so I think that's one of our great things that we have offered up to the world of opera.
Yes. And the great American, the new American works, I think, are so important for American artists. We need them.
Well, you've premiered many characters, yes. Many roles. And I think that's, again, nothing is more exciting than not just a new production, but working on a new opera and cracking into it and understanding, the composer's intentions and the librettist's intentions and how that filters through a performer. And that,
Absolutely.
so many great moments where a composer is like, oh my God, I didn't think it was like that, but you made it even better,
I remember one of my favorite moments. We were doing Transformations in St. Louis. It was a Keith Warner production. And Conrad Souza had come to St. Louis to see it. And at the end of the show, he came up and took a bow with us. And as we were bowing together, he said, "So that's how it goes." I appreciated that. I appreciate it.
Well, it's composers and librettists, and I think you'll all get a chance to work on new pieces. Remember, they're at home, like pouring themselves alone into something. And we have the amazing atmosphere of a rehearsal room and colleagueship of developing things like that on stage together. And so that's why when they do bring a new work to rehearsals, I think you really have to give them what's on the page, and then you can begin to, perhaps see it in other ways or interpret it. But you really want to try and work with, the composer and librettist initial intentions, and then something will grow from that. Again, we're in a collaborative art form. That's what makes us different than, great musical soloists or, people who work individually. We work in collaboration with so many people.
Amen. Did we answer your question, Nicola?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have more questions from anyone? I want to ask some questions, Francesca.
Sure.
When you come to a work, let's say it's a standard work that you've never produced before, right? I'm sure there's got to be one out there, maybe one. How do you come to your concept? How do you form your idea about how you're going to present this story?
Well, I think one of the great things is like, I always treat every opera like it's a brand new opera, even if it's La Boheme that I may have directed many, many times. The first time I ever directed it was at the San Francisco Opera with Luciano Pavarotti and Mirella Freni, actually.
Not too tacky.
But I think when it's a standard piece, you want to try to understand the story fresh. Try not to take preconceptions with you. And of course, the reason that standard pieces often have endured is that they're a masterpiece. And so you want to look at it in the light of today. The way we see The Marriage of Figaro is completely different than the way an audience saw The Marriage of Figaro 50 years, 100 years ago, or at the time of, in 1787 when it was written, So it's important to always treat it in terms of where we are today and how we think about a piece. That doesn't mean you're going to set it today, but that means you're going to try to understand the piece in a way that maybe is shedding, like, onion skins, getting it away and getting back to, again, character. Everything starts with character. The characters are what make the music and make the story. So you want to try and understand them, and then you begin to work with generally the designers. You all work together, you build up a file of reference and research and ideas, visual ideas, paintings, physical objects, places, all of that. And then eventually you also have to deal with what, I think of as like, what does a story need? Like, okay, we're going back to The Marriage of Figaro. The Marriage of Figaro, you need a door, you need a key, you got to have doors,
a window
and a window. So then you start to build from that. What is the way that I'm going to build the world that the story lives in? And how is the architecture and space going to help tell and clarify the story? And then again, you're working with designers. It's not like you say, okay, I want a door here. That you want to give them an environment. And that's what I think is really important to give to performers, is an environment where they can activate the space, where the space becomes alive because of them.
Right. They have more questions. We have more questions from Marilini instead of from me. Although I
Okay,
have another good
Merlini.
one for you too, if no one else.
Okay,
has.
Merlini, let's hit it.
Here it comes,
Hi.
Catherine again.
Oh, Catherine's back? Okay, hi,
I'm
Catherine.
She's curious.
I am. So we've talked, or you, I guess the two of you have talked a lot about American opera. And I'm curious to know what's your favorite American opera that you've either seen or directed? And then is there a story that you know that you would love to see turned into an opera, either specifically or generally?
If I said what was my favorite American opera and then it went out on the internet, I would piss off a lot of composers who I know.
That's fair.
So I am sorry. I'm gonna,
That's okay. I understand.
I'm gonna plead on that one. And then, story. Oh God, it's so funny. I find that every day there's a great story that you encounter. Again, I'm not ducking it, but every day it's a great story. But it's really the composer and the librettist. Does that story speak to them, or they often come to you? As a person who runs an opera company, those people come to you with suggestions. And interestingly, in Washington and Glimmerglass, I have always only ever said to composers and librettists, I only want stories that are set in America. I only want stories about our culture and our country and our people. I don't want us to make Eurocentric opera. I want us to make things that are about us. So in a way, it's always about finding American stories that I think are what I'm interested in. And God, there are a lot. And, an opera plot, can be based on a real event. It can be based on a novel, on a book, or it can be not realistic, or, and again, but the person who is going to write it, it's really important that it just inspires them. And I've been with, when I've commissioned various people, and, the only thing I've said is, just make it somehow inspired by an American something. So I think that, that's kind of where I come from.
Yeah. As a, can I ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
As a director working on a world premiere, what is that process like if the composer and or librettist are in the room with you?
Well, it's tricky. You often want to suggest to the composer and the librettist that they work with the singers musically, just to make sure everybody's on the same page in the beginning. And then most composers and librettists basically understand that it's probably a good idea to go away for a while, because the singers, they have to learn the material. And I don't mean like memorize it. I mean, it has to get in their body. It has to get in their bones. They have to know the characters. And of course, if the composer and the librettist are in the room, they always feel like they're performing. And performance is not what you want in rehearsal. You want process. Rehearsals for process. And that's why, I often gently suggest now is the time you might want to go away for a week and come back. And most people understand that. And then, then once they're there, of course you want to engage with them and involve them in the process. But it's a very delicate thing, because as a director, I'm often the person in the middle, making sure that the performers have the space to find the character themselves and to fill that character out. So the process is exciting because you're doing something for the first time, and everything is changing fast.
Yeah.
Things change very fast.
Even notes.
Even notes, yes.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks, Catherine. I think Audrey, our director, is coming back, I believe. Here she comes. We're on you, Audrey. There you go.
Hi, I'm back. So we were talking about the baritone who says that he doesn't sing on a stool.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about the process of achieving the result of him indeed singing on a stool?
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, I think to all the performers out there, I think it's really good. And I think I said this before, don't start with, no, I'm not doing that. I mean, unless it's something, that's, inappropriate or insulting, or, of course you have every right to express those feelings in a rehearsal process. But if it's like, you know, could you do this or try, you know, I'm always like, I always say to somebody, okay, you don't like it. All I'm asking is like, try it. You know, would you just try it for me? And then if we don't like it, we'll change it. You know, I think everybody has to understand that change is very important in rehearsal, and nothing is written in stone until there's an audience in front of you. And then it might change again for the next time. So I generally try to do the whole thing of like, let's experiment with something else together. Would you? I always think it's really good to ask, and this is good for everybody, you know, phrase it in a question. Don't make an imperative statement. You know, if a director or conductor asks you to do something or tell you to do something that you don't feel good about, you know, I'm not talking about something inappropriate. I'm saying like, could you sing that quarter note faster? You know, then say, let me try it that way for sure. And then maybe could I make a suggestion about another way of trying it? You know, and then everybody's like, don't be like aggressive, you know, just, you know, create some atmosphere in the room where people can, you know, try different things. And that's not to say you're not going to end up in a situation, all the young artists who are out there, where somebody is like, you're the young artist in the room and you're getting picked on. So, you know, when that happens, you know, they're picking on you for your two phrases, but the soprano is screwing up every other line. You know, it's that kind of thing of just like, you know, go to the director, go to the conductor and say, you know, maybe you could work with me just one-on-one so I could get it exactly the way that you're thinking about it. And I could, you know, be involved in the discussion of what it needs to be. And, you know, then we can probably find it together.
Yeah, is that good for you there, Audrey?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for me, I think the flip side of being very collegial and saying, would you, is that as a young director, there's always a balance of asking, but then not seeming like you don't have a clear idea or a clear picture. How do you find that balance?
As a director, it's very good to have a plan A and be ready to go to plan B.
Agreed.
That's like life, everybody. Have a plan A and have a plan B. So,
C might help us at times as well.
Well, right now, for sure. So
Yeah.
Ashley, you are next.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Right.
we've got an Ashley Robillard coming. Can't wait to see her today. Is Ashley on the way? She's our Susanna for next summer in our Nozze di Figaro.
I'm real excited about it.
Great.
Hi.
We've been mentioning Figaro a lot today. Hi, Ashley.
Yeah.
Yeah, so my name's Ashley. I'm singing Susanna next summer. I am just painfully excited about it. And I was wondering, you know, you get to work with a lot of young artists between Glimmerglass and WNO. And I was wondering, is there anything in particular that excites you or that you look for or resonate with when you're working with young artists who are at the beginning of their journey and finding their footing in a significant way?
Well, I think you have to remember that, you know, as somebody who's been doing it a long time, we also need like, energy and new ideas. And, you know, young people bring you new ideas and they have new interpretations and new ways of thinking about things. And I think it's really important to listen. I think it's also important to, of course, you know, share a little bit of the knowledge that I may have accumulated, but also just, you know, listen and see what they have to offer. Because, you know, a role like Susanna, you know, it has, you know, obviously gone through so many different interpretations and seeing how she is today, you know, how does she handle the scenes with the Count? You know, you certainly expect Susanna to be a lot smarter and sassier and, you know, than she might have been 25 years ago even. And I think that's important. I think it's important, again, to bring, you know, a contemporary understanding of a situation within the context of a character. Again, I'm not saying like I'm here to rewrite Mozart or change Shakespeare, but I'm here to find a sort of a balance on these things. So in a young artist, I always look for people who are thinking and who have viewpoint and who have something to offer. And by that, I mean, it's not like, here's what I am, but it's like, again, that thing of dialogue and being ready. I cannot tell you, there are many times I see young artists totally prepared, and there are other times where I see them very underprepared. And when I see them underprepared, my patience is out the window fast, because I think you're in a space where there were like 50 other people who wanted that job. So be ready. But I do think, again, it's that thing, and excuse me if I'm repeating myself, but about, bringing some of yourself to that character and being able to let yourself filter through the lens of, Mozart and Da Ponte. What an exciting thing, Susanna. What a great character. Great character. I'm sorry whoever's singing Figaro, but the opera really should be called Susanna. She never leaves the stage. It's exhausting.
Truly.
Susannas are always exhausted at the end of the night. So get your stamina up. Get your stamina.
Yeah, it's the third longest role, I think, in the soprano repertory.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you mean what about Brunhilde?
There's Brunhilde, there's Butterfly, and then there's Susanna.
Okay.
Is it okay if I ask a follow-up?
Yes.
In regard, because we were touching on the subject of looking at things through the lens of our reality now, is there a piece in particular, and we might have touched on this already, where you recall going through the sort of longest journey with, where your way of viewing it shifted in a significant way? I'm just curious, because we always talk about returning to roles or returning to pieces and how they're always different for us. And so I'd love to hear that from your perspective too.
I guess I feel like I've probably directed Carmen and La Traviata the most in my life, like probably, 10 productions each. I love them both, so I don't mind revisiting them. And I think that my views on those women and how they handle the world around them has probably grown and changed as our views have changed. I mean, they're very complex, interesting women, as are every other, certainly as is Germont, the father, perhaps more than Alfredo, and, as is José, but I love those women, and I'm always interested to work with performers as they're developing those roles, or if they've done them a lot. They have great text and great music and great situations. And so I'm always thrilled to go back and revisit those women. And perhaps my, life views have changed as I've gone along. I mean, obviously something also like Brunhilde. I mean,
yeah.
I never get tired of doing those. I don't get tired of doing those operas. I don't necessarily ever want to do the Elixir of Love again in my life, ever, ever, ever. But, that's fine.
I won't tell Donizetti you said that.
Okay.
I won't tell him.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Sure thing, Ashley.
Francesca, I'm curious, how much control do you have over casting when someone has asked you to do street scene in Houston? How much control
Well, I
would
think,
you have?
most directors, you're working with the general director to create the cast along with often the conductor and, or the head of casting for a company. It's a casting. And this is a good lesson, I think, for all the young artists who are there. Casting happens often in discussions, at a big casting meeting. And sometimes it may not be about your talent. It may be about if people say you're a good colleague or not a good colleague. And you want to, as a young artist, you want to find a way to be yourself and be true to yourself, but be a good colleague, because things like that can dog you for your career and can hurt your career when they're all, we're sitting in those big casting meetings and somebody says, something negative about you, or you did something. So it's like, I don't know, Marilyn Horne said something to me when I was very, very young, which was, be nice to everybody on the way up because you could meet them on the way down. And, that's very true in our profession. Everyone has a place at the table, and it's really about, it's again about collaboration. So the casting thing is like, you have to be able to sing the part. I mean, that's the interesting thing about opera versus theater, is that we do have a standard. You're not going to cast Turandot if she does not have a sustained high C. whereas you might, if turned out was an actress, you might say, oh, she's good and she's good and she's good. It doesn't matter. So there is an absolute in our profession, and you have to be able to sing a role. And hopefully you're going to bring something to it as a performer as well, as an actor or actress.
Okay, we have Philippe L'Espérance coming on board to ask a question. A rather French name.
What a great name.
I know, it's a good one. I like it. Makes me think of the revolution. Vive la France.
Philippe of Hope, hi.
I'm Philippe. I'll be singing The Man with Old Luggage and Postcards next year. My question is, we've talked about the economics of opera a couple times tonight, and I've heard the term post-recession and pre-recession operas a couple times in my gigs, travels, what have you. And like, I was thinking of like the French grand operas, for example, like Guillaume Tell or the Meyerbeer works, which seem to be done more in Europe, probably because it's state funded. But I was wondering, why are they probably done more over in Europe than here? And is there a way, I feel like there's still very important works like the French Grand Opera and like the lesser done, more obscure operas that aren't really done here. Is like there a reason why? And is it solely economics or what have you?
I mean, it's economics and what you're going to, be able to sell. I mean, I think, I love those. I love William Tell, and I love, the works of Gluck and Berlioz, and, they're great, great operas. I think part of it is economics and part of it is taste. I mean, I don't know if an audience wants to, and if a theater can, San Francisco Opera, you do a certain opera, they have to have a certain number of performances of every opera to satisfy the subscription packets. This may be getting too granular for you, but this is a little bit, Washington National Opera, we have to do at least 6 performances of an opera because we have, 12 subscription groups. And so you've got that. And you've also, you've got to know your audience. Is Meyerbeer's Robert le Diable just better done as a concert opera now than on stage? So I certainly think, yes, European theaters tend to have more of the funds where they can put them behind those kinds of works. But, I love it when, small companies pull rabbits out of hats and do some of those incredibly difficult and complex works. Maybe they're reducing them a lot, but that's okay. Then you get a chance to see it and experience it. And so I think, I think it does have to do with economics and what your audience is going to see. And generally, when you make a season, when you plan a season, you have, okay, we'll do like 2 standard operas and 2 lesser known operas and 1 contemporary work. And, you kind of have to make what I call a dim sum platter of what are the shows that you're going to do that are going to bring, diversity to your audience, as well as, stretch your company and do something interesting for your company. You don't just want to do Aida Bohème Carmen for a season. You just don't want to do that. And also those are called tent poles, when in our business, when you're planning them. So, you don't want to give away too many tent poles in a season either, and again, you want to make sure when you do those operas, you got to make sure that you have like a great singers to do them.
Right.
Just that's very important. So I don't know if that helps, but this is like administration 101. And so I'm, it's a different class than tonight, but I wish you a lot of luck. Philippe L'Espérance, great name. So thank you.
And a tenor, what else, right?
I couldn't have guessed.
Yeah, right. I think we have a Jessie Mashburn coming along here. And Miss Jessie is a mezzo-soprano.
Hi, Jessie.
Hi, my name is Jessie Mashburn. I just graduated from the University of Maryland. Dolores Ziegler is my teacher. She said to say hello.
I love her. She's great.
She loves you too. I will be singing.
Great school. good.
Yeah. I will be singing La Tia Principessa in Suor Angelica in the Schwabacher concert series next summer, as well as Isabella and Marta.
In Italiana?
Yes.
Okay,
Concert,
good. All right, good.
concert.
Okay, fine. Okay.
So my question is, after our acting sessions with Chuck Hudson, I realized I want to research a little bit more like a director than how I've usually been researching my roles. And I wanted to know what advice you have for researching the operas, maybe the genre, like the different periods that each opera comes from.
Are you friends with Samson McCurdy, who was on this earlier?
I know him, yeah.
Okay, well, because I taught a whole class to the WNO kids this spring.
Okay.
I guess you can't bring Samson back, but I have a long list of things that I recommend that you do, and then we went and did it with each person and each character. I'm not fobbing it off on poor Samson, but I do think this is for everybody, that there is kind of a, there is a level of study and preparation that I call it beyond the notes, where,
yes.
You need to go back to, the history of the pieces.
History of the period. How about that?
History of the period.
Yes.
You have to understand the composer's life, the librettist's life, and then everything that's going on when they wrote it. What was going on politically, socially, economically, all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, all that good stuff.
I mean,
that you can do when
that's a
you're
place
young.
to start. But then Samson and all of the young artists at WNO, then we also were doing stuff like, I would say, make a list of adjectives about who is your character. Make a list of adjectives that other people say about you. Make a Spotify list of what you think your character listens to today. I mean, just to understand a character, you need to do all of that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely know that I need to do so much more research on historical context and textual evidence.
It makes you appreciate the piece better. So,
yes, I agree.
And understand it better. And especially if you're doing Isabella, well, you need to have something to fill out all that coloratura. It can't just be endless notes. You have to have some substance behind it, some ideas, some interpretation. That doesn't mean that you have to be a scholar about a piece, but understanding it is great.
I would agree with that. Yes.
All right.
Thank
Good luck.
you, Jessie.
Thank you.
I think we have Celeste Morales coming to us. She's sitting in New York City right now, though she hails from San Antonio, and she and I are both San Antonio Spurs fans. Thank you.
Hello.
Hi, Celeste. We're on the same time zone. Hi.
Hi. Yes. My name is Celeste Morales. I am from San Antonio, Texas, and I will be doing Vanessa by Barber and Suor Angelica by Puccini in the Schwabacher scenes next summer, and I'm so excited about that. Your life is so interesting to me, and I just find directors to be just like this mystical creature of some sort that has all these creative juices flowing in their head, or they just look at a story or a perspective in a different light. But what makes me so interested about your story and your journey is that you are a successful female opera director. And back then, going through all of that and being this young female director, is there any challenges that you faced that you overcame, or is there anything that you would tell, your younger self back then?
Well,
I'm just going to jump in to say, we were having a discussion about Black Lives Matter the other day, and we were sort of going around, and I said, well, I actually belong to an oppressed minority as well, because I'm a woman. And I remember working in big business in New York City back in the early 70s. And trust me, I had the first Ms. magazine on my table.
Yeah, of course I encountered a lot of discrimination, and people didn't want to hire me, and I was the only woman who was in a department, or I was the first woman to direct at many theaters that I worked in. Even now, women general directors, there are not very many of us. So yeah, I mean, of course. And I think that, you know, I don't know what to say, you know, obviously there's been a privilege about certain people. And I think that, you know, I worked very hard. I worked very, very hard to get where I was. And I think it is like so many things, you know, it's hard work and dedication and a certain amount of talent and a certain amount of being in the right place at the right time. And a little bit of, it's really important to have somebody or a couple of people who believe in you. And when you find those people, you know, be grateful and hope that they help you. And yes, I mean, I've got, you know, a million stories, you know, and I'll leave you with one funny one and then we'll go. I mean, it's funny now, it wasn't funny at the time, where it was in the early 90s and I was asked to direct at the Vienna State Opera. And they asked my agent, you know, could Francesca Zambello direct opera XYZ? And my agent wrote back and said, Francesca Zambello is available for that period and would be, and they said, wait a minute, it's a woman? No. Now, if they said that now, of course, it'd be a lawsuit. Back then it wasn't a lawsuit. So anyway, yes, there've been a lot of things. And I think, you know, now what's important is that we're facing, again, you know, some real social questioning about so many issues. And I think that that's important to dismantle them. And also keep in mind, again, you know, I don't want to throw away Beethoven. I want to look at Beethoven in our eyes of today.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Celeste, thank you so much. Well, Celeste and I, it's 8:30 almost. So it's about time. I got to go make dinner.
That's right.
Well, then we will wrap up with our.
Oh, we lost her. Did we lose? Celeste, it's you and me here. We lost Sheri.
I mean, I could always ask another question.
I don't know if we're on or not. Are you a soprano or a mezzo? Oh, Sheri, there you are. Hi, we lost you for a minute.
Oh, you're muted, Sheri.
Sheri, you're muted. Sheri, you're muted.
Now, I think I'm there.
You're there.
Cheska, 1,000 more questions that I always would have for you, but I know I'll see you again, right?
For sure. I mean,
and
it was great.
I can't thank you enough for sharing your very valuable time with us, and I know that. And I wish you the best going forward in these horribly difficult times. I do not envy you. Like I say, it's a good time for me to retire because I have to leave these solutions up to the younger and brighter of you. I want to say one thing. I know you say it's a difficult time, and it is in many ways. But I do think, and I want to just say to all the people, younger people who are out there, it is in difficult times that change happens, and change happens for the good. And it's not going to happen overnight, but I do think that we will come out on the other side stronger and better. And I hope that you as artists, all of you, I wish I could see you, but I can't. I only see their 26 participants. I hope that all of you know that you can use your art for change and for good. And I hope that you will do that. And I hope you will think about ways that you could do that. So thank you so much to the Merolini. I love the Merolini. And thank you so much, Sheri. It's a pleasure being with you. Great to see you, Cheska.
Take care.
Night. Good night to you. And I'm just going to mention what we have coming up next week. We have a master chat with David Garrison. David is a friend of mine who is a Broadway star, but also a television actor. And I am making him into a director. He will direct Dominic Argento's one-act opera Postcard from Morocco next summer for us. And we will have a conversation with David, who has done crossover work. And so to discuss crossover work with the Merolini, which I think will be very interesting. And this will be next Thursday, July 23rd at 4 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And I hope to see you next week. And I certainly know I'll see my dear young artists next week.